Hey everybody, welcome to the Opportunity podcast. I'm really excited because I've got Leila MacKenzie here, who's a sports editor covering women's sports primarily for the Daily Trojan at USC. And, at the time of recording, yesterday was a big win over number three UCLA or number two UCLA. So a lot of exciting stuff going on at USC women's basketball. But I reached out to Layla and wanted to have her on and just kind of hear her story, hear how she got into sports editing. She just shared with me, I'm not a journalism major, but I'm in the sports world here and taking part of the Daily Trojan. So, Layla, thanks for hopping on with us for a little bit. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background of like who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm a sophomore at USC. I am a sports editor at the Daily Trojan. As you said, I primarily cover women's sports, but I'm originally from South Florida. I grew up playing a whole bunch of tennis, not a lot of other sports, but I was always outside, um, being very competitive, sometimes roughhousing a little bit. And that was always a lot of fun. And then coming into college, I'm an applied math and comparative literature major, so not entirely super sporty or super journalism-y, but I was so excited to go to a school with a huge athletics program. And it was really cool entering college. All of my relationships with sports was definitely something that I was going to be able to define for myself. So growing up, always watching baseball, football, basketball, those kinds of things, I got to come to college to a school with predominantly women's sports, and I was able to follow whatever league that I was interested as well. So it's been really awesome to immerse myself in women's sports, be able to give them a platform and cover the stories with a lot of compassion and a lot of in-depth analysis that they don't always receive, and being able to really reimagine what the section looks like as well coming into this semester as an editor has been really exciting already. And USC women's sports are also awesome, so it's already looking out to be a really great ordeal. So
For
yeah.
sure. Well, okay, so didn't know you were from Florida. So how
Oh
was like
yeah.
was USC like on your radar of like, oh, this is just a school I always seen growing up and like this is where I want to go kind of thing? Because that's a coast to coast
Oh yeah.
move.
I was very adamant about leaving my home state. I was born and raised there, and I wanted something just brand new. And California is definitely very different. I also wanted a huge athletics program just because that's so fun. That's something that you are able to carry with you basically your whole life. Wherever you go, you're going to have alumni events, and you're going to be able to get together with a bunch of people and watch a football game. And that's just a great way to live. I feel like sports is just a great way of just elevating your existence in general. Um, and yeah, they just overall USC is just very well rounded. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of financial support from the school as well. So everything just turned out great. They were definitely like my top school, so it's pretty cool to be here, and I'm happy that I've been able to stick around and do all kinds of cool things.
So grew up playing tennis, and so you just
Yeah.
said some things of like, hey, I want to go to USC. We kind of have this like team feel. We got all the sports and this
Oh yeah.
community. Tennis is kind of like isolating though. So like, how'd you go from like, hey, I'm this tennis player to seeking community and like that's where you landed?
Yeah, I was over tennis. You're exactly right. So I grew up pretty close to IMG, which so tennis was like very it was definitely consuming the culture around where I lived, around like Bradenton, and it was also a whole bunch of older people, so people were always playing tennis, and I played right across from my house, which was always really cool. I started playing tournaments when I was really really young, and I wasn't bad. Also, I was pretty good, but I took every loss with a lot of it didn't knock my pride, but I was like, wow, I was supposed to win everything. And I don't think anyone really explained to me like it's very difficult playing an individual sport without any guidance. I feel like so continuing to just try and try. I stopped playing as many tournaments, and I really wanted to start playing other sports because, like I said, I was very active in just about everything. I just had never played like organized basketball or anything like that, and my parents were a little apprehensive of me doing that. So by the time I was like getting towards the end of high school, I was kind of the over the individual tennis kind of thing. I was like, I want a team, I want a community. So it was just very invested in a lot of my academics, extracurriculars, and I was like, all right, we're booking into California, and we're gonna see what we can find there, and it's been
Nice.
really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, because I didn't grow up playing tennis. My wife did. We started watching
Mm.
that Netflix series,
Open
Breakpoint.
court. Oh,
Uh,
Breakpoint. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I don't think, if you're not like in the tennis world, I don't think you really realize like how mentally taxing and kind of like all on your own and in your own
oh
head,
yeah,
and like all these crazy emotions that go with playing these tournaments and the expectations and all of that. It's like she always says, she's like, that's the first time I started cussing, was like playing tennis in high
oh
school.
yeah.
Like,
Oh my God, you're
just
alone.
dropping bombs everywhere. It's just you
Yeah,
and living with that.
yeah. It's definitely a strange sport, just being on one side of the court the entire time. Every point is different, and then it goes on for like 2.5 hours. It's just it's a weird sport. But I feel like entering college as well, now that I don't have to, like, I'm not playing it, I'm not like in the, like, I myself am not in that situation. I found a greater appreciation for the sport as well. Like the Australian Open starting this week, and it's already been like kind of consuming my sleep schedule as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So definitely getting back into it as I entered college has been really awesome as well.
Nice, nice. Way to take it from, tournament serious to hobby and something you can actually, find the
Yeah.
enjoyment in, again, for sure. But so you're at USC, you're given, these, women's programs as much coverage as possible, and kind of what you're doing, and putting your kind of heart and stuff into that. Let's talk a little. We're in basketball
Oh
season
yeah.
now. There's kind of at the beginning of this year, there's a lot circulating, just USC sports in general. Like you got LeBron sitting there watching, little
Mhm.
LeBron playing. But on the women's side, like you got like the freshman who's out there who, like, if there was a one and done in, women's basketball, like she would be like the case, which is Juju Watkins. Like what's kind of like the vibe and hype like over there, where, at that game yesterday, like that's a packed arena, to watch a women's basketball game.
Right. Yesterday they had 10,258 people there. It was the biggest women's basketball game in USC history, home or away, which was incredible. The atmosphere, it was like, it's like shaking. The game also had everything you can imagine. Like, for context, they played UCLA yesterday, the number 2 team in the country, who they also lost to a couple weeks before in UCLA. The best players on USC team is like you said, Juju Watkins, who's from Watts. Raya Marshall, their second best player, is from South Central. UCLA's best players are also from Los Angeles. So it was like a real battle for Los Angeles as well. 2 top 10 teams. And it's really been, people are really like gathering behind them. I feel like they're also gaining a lot of confidence and belief in themselves very quickly, which is really interesting. Lindsay Gottlieb is in her 3rd year, so it's also still kind of a fresh team. And the team hasn't really had any success in like 2 decades. It's been a really long time since they've gotten out of the first round of the NCAA tournament. And the men's team hasn't been all of that either. This year, they're also kind of disappointing a little bit, even though they do have all of the stardom. So just seeing them continue to improve week on week, and they're really just exciting. Like, they have a really rich soul. I feel like they're also just, they're very humble, but at the end they know how to celebrate. They know how to put on a show. At the very end of yesterday, Juju collapsed on the court. She was dealing with cramps. They were all like coming to attend to her, and then she like grabbed the mic and she like yelled like "fight on" into it. Like, that is the epitome of sports. We're really getting, I feel like, everything with this team, and I think it's going to be, they've repeated over and over again they didn't realize that they'd have this kind of success so quickly, and just seeing them be able to take off in women's basketball. Like, these programs, the ones that are good, have existed for so long, like UConn, or like South Carolina, or even like Tennessee. It takes time, and seeing them kind of just really take off with it has been really exciting to watch. And then Juju averaging like 30 points a game as a freshman
Is
is
insane.
ridiculous. And I
Yeah.
keep having to remind myself that she will actually be back. Like, in my head, she's done. She's going to the W. It's over. But no, like, she's probably going to be here year after year. She's probably going to leave after I do. And that is really difficult for me to wrap my head around, which
Yeah.
is really
Well,
cool.
and you talk about like, the early on success. I think a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
is like the hype and a little bit more coverage of what's going on, in Southern California. And, even just for me yesterday, like I'm in San Diego, but
Mhm.
it's like impossible to get a game on the Pac-12 network if you're not like, so
Yeah.
it's just even just the coverage of it, it's like it's hard to find. So I'm like sitting there like kind of watching the stat cast and watching like YouTube like highlights as they come up, and it's an exciting team. Like, you know, yeah, Juju went over 30 again yesterday, but it's like her ability to finish at the hoop, but not just like as many points as you guys probably scored in the paint. Like girls are
Oh,
hitting
yeah.
threes all over the place. Like I think she was 15 or 16 of 16 from the free throw line. So
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
there's just a lot going on there and it's exciting. So I think that as, you know, she has obviously these committed years of being in school, I think you guys have an awesome opportunity to get some more top top talent and
Oh,
compete
absolutely.
compete with some of those,
Yeah.
established programs.
I do believe in this team. The person I feel like I believe in most, honestly, is their head coach, Lindsay, who, when you go and interview her, like she will take you into her office, you will sit down with her, and she would, if you wanted to have an hour of her time, she would probably give it to you. She gives every single question like the most attention you could possibly imagine, and you could ask her the same question 5 times, and she would give you an entirely different essay response each time as well. She is committed and excited and just kind and compassionate. And I don't think that they could have a better coach leading the team as well, which is, I'm feeling dynasty. It's coming. Like I I I I am so excited about this team and I'm so excited to watch them like forever. But you
Yeah,
mentioned how it's very difficult to watch a lot of the women's sports that are coming out of Southern California. I follow the NWSL a lot, and it's always weird, like going on Twitch and things like that. I was in
yeah,
Mississippi for winter break trying to find the women's basketball games. And the interesting thing about that is people are still trying, which is really cool. I feel like people that are interested in women's sports, their interest is even heightened because they're like, okay, I'm interested in this, and now I have to go through all of these interesting avenues to try to find ways to watch my sport, and they continue to do so. Like we see viewership like increasing by fourfold in a lot of these different leagues, so people are paying attention and they're even putting an effort to do that. When men's, a lot of time you just turn on the TV and it's the first thing on ESPN, which is really cool as well. So once they do get the platforms and the opportunities to get really massive national viewership, I feel like it could even skyrocket and surpass a lot of the men's viewership statistics, just because it has been so hard for so long and people are very
yeah.
eager to
Yeah,
get
I think
to
that's
watch
like
their
normal.
teams.
You're at home and you like turn on ESPN, you're like
Yeah.
you just leave it on what is on, which is like, you know, a men's college game, and you just like leave it on because it's on, and maybe that would increase some more exposure if you flipped on the TV and you're like, oh wow, like USC UCLA, this is a, you know, two top 10 matchups, like let's check it out. I think there's so much more opportunity. So I think you mentioned kind of like, the year over year growth and viewership and things like that. I think there's still a lot to come, in terms of the exposure of the game. But you talked about, your head coach over there, and maybe, past couple years of struggles of not making it out of like the first round of, the big March Madness tournament. But the Pac 12 as a whole, like there's a lot of good teams. So I think if you get like multiple of these teams are going to make it into the tournament, which is amazing. But I think that you'll be battle tested, like to see a UCLA twice a year, to see Stanford, Colorado. Like there's some good basketball being played in the Pac-12. So it's like, I think by the time you get to those tournament games, like we've seen as good
Oh
as it
yeah.
gets, pretty much, right?
I 100% agree. Something that we talked about at the paper at the beginning of the season was having the number one men's and women's recruit. We were like, okay, which team is going to do the best come the regular season? Who's going to be able to enter the tournament and really succeed? And a lot of people were leaning towards the men's side just because the Pac 12 wasn't as strong, and so that they would have an easier path. But I think we're beginning to find that having those really tough games early on does create a lot of it creates a lot of belief in the team that they can compete. And then week after week, if you're gaining that kind of momentum, I feel like Yeah, it's going to prepare them really well for the tournament, especially because they can compete with the best teams in the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 is horrifying. Seeing Cameron Brink every single week, she's averaging, it's not just a double-double. It's like 20 points, 20 rebounds.
Yeah,
Like, it's absolutely insane. And seeing Stanford lose to Colorado this weekend,
like
that's
by a
scary
good
because
margin. Yeah.
in Colorado beating LSU, who's considered to be like one of the biggest college basketball teams in decades.
Yeah.
So it's really it's kind of scary to watch from the perspective of a USC fan, but seeing the Pac-12 go out with a big bang because this is their last season, which is kind of sad seeing how good they are. And even in football, they were also doing the same thing where the entire conference was just incredible. But seeing them, yeah, kind of band together and just really go at it, I feel like the entire conference is going to be really strong going into the tournament.
Yeah, I think what, men's or women's tournament, when you get to March, it's like star power. Like, you watch like the Caitlin Clark kind of
Oh my God.
scenario where it's like, if you have somebody out there dropping 30 plus, like you can win literally any game you step
Oh
on the
yeah.
court. And I think USC has that. And what's crazy is just we haven't really seen it come from a freshman,
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah.
it's like, I think once you get there, it's like the bright lights are on. You guys have seen it, and see how the dice fall.
Exactly.
Um,
I Oh, go ahead.
yeah, and just in terms of like star power, who else do you mentioned Cameron Brink. Utah's got some firepower, which I know, like, I think you had mentioned you guys play them at the end of this week. Um,
Yeah.
so that
Uh
what are you guys looking for in the Utah game?
so what's so interesting about Utah is their best player, Alyssa Pilley, went to USC before she went to Utah. And they're going to her home court. So that should be interesting because she's going to be the one where people are really rallying behind her and she has a huge fan base. So they're really going to be heightened just because they're going to say, okay, we want her to have that revenge against her former team, especially because their former team is a top 10 team as well. And that's once again, like you mentioned, having that one star in college basketball means everything. And anyone can compete if you have a player that can really just put the team on their back and carry. And she did that when they played South Carolina. Like they were really close. If South Carolina, in terms of recruiting and just the culture of that team and how long they've built it and maintained it, you have Dawn Staley out there. Like being able to compete with them is really incredible, but also scary from the perspective of a
Yeah.
USC fan. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting period of conference play, and it's going to be like that every single game. So I'm really looking forward to this week and just about every single game to come.
Yeah, you guys might have the best like conference tournament. Like when that lines up in I think you guys are still in Vegas. Like though that's like would be like an amazing all session kind of ticket to have to just go watch them like beat the heck out of each other and see who. It'll be
Yeah.
really interesting to see who's kind of at the top after that, long weekend, or I think women get pushed to the middle of the week or whatever. So um that'll be interesting to see for sure. What do you kind of see on the landscape? So you've been a part of the Daily Trojan for, you know 2 years or so now. What's kind of what do you want to see with like the women's sports coverage and like your role and what you're doing to kind of tell some of the stories of, the awesome athletes and teams you guys got?
Yeah, one thing that we've already always done as a paper very well is making sure that the coverage is very balanced. So if there's a women's basketball game, without a doubt, there's going to be a recap coming out. Same thing for women's golf or beach volleyball or whatever it may be. But I think where our biggest shortcoming has been for so long is that you don't get analysis pieces of women's sports. You don't get somebody doing a really in-depth statistical deep dive. Even like Sports Reference for the longest time didn't have WNBA statistics until maybe last summer or maybe the summer before. So I think just thinking, okay, not only do we have to cover these teams, but we actually have to give them attention. We need to give them care. We need to listen to the players. We need to ask them questions that go beyond how are you feeling. It needs to be something that takes time and really consumes a lot of our thinking. I mean, as sports fans, and sports writers, you're definitely a sports fan and definitely consumes basically all of your time. You're always glued to your Bleacher Report, refreshing the scores and everything. Just making sure that women's sports isn't secondary. It's not like, oh, we have to include it just to be equal. It's this deserves our attention. This is exciting. And just treating it as something that is actually valuable, I think, is something that I want to preach to a lot of our writers, and also get more diversity in this section as well. I'm the first sports editor that I've seen in my time, and I know people that are much older than me that have been with the paper for a few years longer, and have also never seen a woman as one of the sports editor. There's only maybe a couple other female writers on a team of maybe 40 people. So just getting women in the loop so that they can also kind of bring the proper perspective and the proper tone to writing about women's sports as well. One thing that was really interesting and bothered me so much last year was someone wrote a really beautiful feature on Raya Marshall, one of the basketball players that we mentioned earlier. She's from South Central. She's from the community, so you had so much to work with. She was like on the brink of homelessness. Her story is really interesting, and her as a person, she's just so wonderful. And the approach to the story was as if they'd never watched women's basketball in their lives. Like, she was the first player that they'd seen succeed. She can dunk, and they were very blown away with that fact, as if it had never been done before, or if it was an insane anomaly for some woman to be dunking, which was strange to me because I thought we had gotten over that 20 years ago with Candace Parker. But nevertheless, we were treating it as if she was the first woman to ever be good at basketball. And that was just so strange to me. So I'm very excited to be the first person to read a lot of these stories and redirect a lot of the tone surrounding talking about women as if they're actually, once again, worthy of being talked about and consuming a part of our thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and just even me kind of reaching out and finding you through one of
Yeah.
your article, game recaps that you had
Mm-hmm.
written. I was searching around for people like you, and it was hard to find. So a lot of the post game like write ups are like
Mm-hmm.
pretty garbage. They're like, they shot this percent and this was the
Mm-hmm.
top scorer, and the coach said we're going to keep working hard, and it was like that was it, and that was like syndicated on like multiple sites for like the same kind
Yeah.
of horrible recap. I'm like, that tells me literally like nothing about the game. I could probably tell you that by looking at the box score. You know what I mean? um and there was a couple, and definitely I was trying to find a female who was like in it, immersed in it, and maybe had a different tone, because anybody can cover it, but I was looking for somebody like you, and it was very difficult to find. And you reference the hey, I'd like to see more of me out there. There's not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's strange. Which is also weird because I'm also coming from kind of a different background academically into entering the space as well. So that does worry me as well. Like, people are studying journalism and they don't even feel comfortable joining the papers and like the opportunities that are going to, maybe they find different avenues to progress their career, but maybe they entered college saying, "Hey, I want to be a sports writer." And maybe they went into communications or marketing or something that is a little bit more saturated with other women. But yeah, it's difficult. And I feel like a lot of other papers as well, they do wait the time that it takes to pump out a recap. So maybe they want their recap 5 seconds after the game. So that's when you get the play by play kind of thing. But one thing that we do value is saying, you know what, these players are in college. A lot of them aren't going to go on to become professionals. This is going to be the only time where consistently their play is going to be documented. And I feel like they have the right to have a little bit more time. If they have a really awesome game, that could be their only one. That could be the one time they're off the bench. I think they deserve to have a nice, long form, thoughtful analysis of their performance, something that they can kind of look back on and say, "Hey, I was in the paper and it was really sweet." Other than, "Hey, I was in the paper. They said I scored 10 goals." Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's just not doing them justice because it takes a lot of work to be a student athlete. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and so you come to USC and you're like, I'm not a journalism major, I'm doing other things. Like, how did you fall into where you are? And like now, if you have this kind of, growing passion for what you're
yeah.
doing and the stories you're telling, like, what's your goal? I'm not saying you don't have to have it
Yeah,
all figured out as, a sophomore in college by any means, but what's kind of on your horizon, and what do you want to do with it?
I think what was really interesting was at the beginning, because that wasn't my major, I had no pressure. I felt like I could just kind of do as much as I wanted. And at first it was, I'm going to all the games. I might as well make $15 by writing the recap. And it was really cool being part of a space where so many people were interested in sports. Um, as just a whole. They could talk about anything. So it was really great to be a part of that community. But yeah, entering, I wasn't super involved. It's been a very gradual progression of how often I write stories and how comfortable I am. At first, it was, do I have the authority to speak on this? I don't play the game. I sometimes I'd be covering like a volleyball game. I'd never played volleyball in my life. And I was like, well, why am I the one writing about this? And slowly over time, I was like, okay, well, somebody's got to do it. I might as well just do a really great job and try to improve over time. And um, I think my passion for what has been going on at the paper, or being able to give voice to a lot of the games and a lot of the players, is because I've seen a lot of the inequity in coverage, and I get a little twinge of anger every time I see that there's something a little bit off kilter, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a lot of effort into this and see how far I can take it so that at least our school paper is doing a good job. And I want to leave a very sustainable structure in place so that there is equitable and compassionate coverage for the semesters to come. So yeah, that's kind of been my progression and the way I've eased into the role as editor. And also, I felt like a lot of the opportunities that I've been given were given to me, which is really cool. People were they kind of just said, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? Even though I don't think I was ready to do that. And I was talking about women's soccer when I had covered one game and knew maybe two players. And just every time I was given an opportunity, I would put an obscene amount of effort and time into making sure that I was prepared once maybe the Tuesday the following week came. And then people just kept giving me opportunities. And I think I took them, which was really fun. And I feel like it's starting to pay off a lot.
For sure. I think there's like something to be said, even if you don't know every player, you're just, diving into a new sport that you didn't play
Mm,
growing up or watch
yeah.
that much. I think that's like the great thing about like an opinion piece type write up is like you're giving perspective to somebody who else who's probably in the same exact shoes as you are. Like not everybody's
That's
a
true.
crazy
Yeah.
expert on it. Somebody's like perusing through it or, whatever it is. And they're picking up on probably just some of like the rawness that you're kind of putting on paper that
Mhm.
hey, here's what's going on. Here's what like a normal person's outlook on the women's soccer game was, and just kind of giving a feel, like an honest feel for the flow of the game or who did what. I think that's a powerful thing in itself, other than like knowing every tactical strategy of what goes on in a soccer game. So I think you just keep plugging away.
I agree. I also think when you're coming to a sport without any prior knowledge, you experience a lot of the awe that a fan may experience, as well as someone who's not coming there to just take a very analytical stance and remember every single play. More so, someone who's just there to enjoy it. When something really awesome happens that you've never seen before, you get to experience the joy with everybody else. And then there's a bit more of a colorful description and a lot more excitement that you're putting into maybe describing that event as well. And I'm beginning to learn that when you are kind of well versed in a sport, it can make you a little bit cynical and maybe not the greatest writer. This happened to me this week. There was a men's basketball game, and they didn't play very well. LeBron was there. They were playing Washington State. They should have won the game, and they were being a little sloppy. They scored 0 points in the last like 2 minutes when it was basically tied. And I started my lead with like, it was brick by brick. They constructed their own defeat. And I got blasted in the comments. Everyone was saying like, oh, you're being too harsh. This is psychotic. And I took a moment and I was like, okay, if you looked at the box score, if you looked at the play by play, you would see that, yeah, they were missing shots and that is why they lost. But the storyline there was not as negative. Half their team was out with an illness or an injury. One of their best players, who scored almost 20 points, who wasn't great down the stretch, probably because he was tired. He didn't practice all week with a hamstring injury. And I should have been focused on that, saying, oh, hey, like they banded together. He still played in the game, and just talking about maybe more so the team's culture and what was actually important. But I was just frustrated, and I was like, wow, it's midnight. The game just ended and I'm angry. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's still a learning process. And yeah, when you're not as well versed with the sport, you are a little bit more appreciative for what is going on and what goes into actually succeeding. So yeah, I think you're absolutely correct.
Well, props on the, killer headline. Like we're trying to get some readers and papers here. I think you got a couple, you got a little extra hate in the comments, but that's because more people read it
Yeah,
probably.
get some clicks. That's what we need.
Some clicks, you need all of that, and you need some of that boldness. But it's like, hey, I'm one of you. I'm frustrated as hell too because like that sucked to watch down the stretch. Like
That's true. Yeah.
here it is. So don't keep firing away. Those some of these guys, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world and all
Oh
that.
my
Like
goodness.
they didn't get there by like sugar coating every single thing and hey, the boys really tried
That's
hard
true.
today. So you put your true feelings on paper. Like that's what you're there for. um well, what are we? We're almost to February, so we're getting 2 months
Yeah.
away from kind of tournament time. Hopefully you guys have a strong kind of second half here of or kind
Hmm.
of rolling into the middle of conference play. Do you go out to the Pac-12 tournament for games for coverage, or is that something on your radar that you want to do?
Oh, absolutely. We're saving up in our budget to if they when they go to the Pac-12 tournament, we'll probably cover the men's and women's. We've always done that in the past. If they go to March Madness, if they're going to the Final Four, you bet I'm booking it to Cleveland. Oh, 100%. That's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Being able to go to a school when they're that good. Like the Final Four. That's pretty incredible. That's
Yeah,
really looking far ahead, but they're looking really great. So yeah, if they're in the tournament, I'll definitely make a strong push to get myself over there and a few other people as well. I think
nice.
that would be a really great opportunity. Just to once again appreciate the game. That's an incredible atmosphere to be a part of. So I think, yeah, being able to go over there would be incredible.
Yeah, for sure. One of the I don't know how many like WNBA games you've been to, but if
Hmm.
you ever make it out to a Vegas Aces game, like the atmosphere is crazy. It's like it's loud the whole time. I think that's just about like every Vegas sport now. It's like you're kind of like at the club the entire game, which is cool and exciting and a little bit different and a little more stimulating than some other places. But it's got a lot going on there for the hotbed of some up and coming teams and a great team that they got over there. Um, as we kind of get to Vegas and Pac-12 tournament, hoping making a long push. I know you want to be appreciative of your team and they're
Yeah.
exciting. Like, give me like one little critique. Like, what do we want to see the USC women kind of do better down the stretch here heading towards March?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it is well, a lot of it changed actually yesterday because when I was watching their first UCLA game, my biggest critique for them, because that was one of their first, outside of the first Ohio State game, that was the only time they were really contested or challenged. Um, and they didn't seem, they can be very nonchalant at times. They have a lot of graduate students who are very good at keeping a level cool. Juju is a fighter. Like when she's in the paint, she's going after every single rebound. She can do just about everything. But sometimes when she's about to toss in the ball or she's walking in between plays or she's going up for a free throw, I feel like the energy kind of sags a little bit. And I really wish that once they got wired or when they were really going on a high tempoed run, even when the ball was not in play, I wish they would keep that energy up. I wish they would continue to be in the faces of their opponents because when they're playing, when they have their press going, like they're totally overwhelming their opponents. And that's something they preach: high tempo, high tempo, high tempo. And I think they're really good at continuing that kind of momentum throughout the game and really picking it up. And maybe that's their strength is that they can tone down their own emotions and be very level the entire time. But I think it would be really great for them to be charged at all times. I really think if they just ran away with it and they were like, winning is going to consume me and we're going to make it look very evident that we are the better team and we're beating UCLA by 10 points. I think that would be great for them. I think they would be able to have a little bit more fire when they do. get into the pits kind of at the end of a game and they need a little bit of a resurgence. I think making sure that they're really celebrating their successes throughout the game would be very beneficial for them.
There's that tennis player in you, Layla.
Yeah. We got to see them slapping their legs. Let's go. Let's do it. Yeah.
And every team kind of always, the great teams always have like that moment, and maybe it's coming. It's like they get the big win yesterday, and you got a couple, obviously some more big games against top, it'll be top 10 teams, and you got the tournament. So maybe something will happen, and they decide, hey, we put the foot on the gas the whole time, and let's go shock the world and do something crazy with our stars. Well, thanks so much, Layla, for hopping on and sharing some insight. I hope you'll join us maybe like as we get like right up to March again or something, and we'll kind of take your recap of the whole season and kind of wish you guys luck into the tournament. So if you'll come back, we'd love to have you and do it again.
That would be incredible. I really feel like what you're doing here is really awesome, highlighting women's voices, especially people that are covering sports. I feel like that's not something that we always get to do. So this has been really wonderful. It's been a lot of fun to talk over the last 30, 40 minutes. Awesome. So yeah, I would love to come back.
Let's do it.